I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hi, listeners. I have a really awesome guest on today, and we're going to talk about why she does what she does, as we always do on this show. Her name is Egette Indelele, and we will talk about her organization, Safe Haven Space. But first, welcome, Egette. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
Now, first, tell our listeners how you were sent our way.
Yeah. So I actually heard about you from Delegate Willett. So he had mentioned that, he had an interview with you just recently, right before we were speaking. And that interview with me and him, it was for the Racial Truth and Reconciliation Week. And he was just getting to know about, me and Safe Haven and what he can do to help.
Fantastic. So we're talking about Rodney Willett, listeners, that we had on the show, who is a politician, new to being a politician in Virginia, and I used to live there. And my neighbor runs the organization that he also works for. So before he got into politics, and he's very, very interested in mental health initiatives. So I was like, I'll interview a politician. So Egette, tell our listeners, let's go through it easily so I don't just dump it on your lap. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background in terms of the United States and where you were living before and that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So I was born in Tanzania, in a refugee camp in Tanzania. My family had escaped the Rwanda and Burundi genocide, and they were going from refugee camp to refugee camp just to find a place to, call it home. So we were in the refugee camp in Tanzania they were in the refugee camp for more than 30 years. I was there till I was 8 years old. And that's when we came to America. I came here when I was about to turn 9 years old, and this was in 2006. I didn't know any English, did not know how to write, nothing, because I had never attended school. Just because we were moving a lot from different refugee camp to different refugee camp. And it was just difficult coming to, a new world where there's different culture, different norms. And I had to learn a new language right from the start. It was difficult, but I got out of the English language learners program when I was in 5th grade. So that program is for students who are coming from other countries and don't really understand what America is, what what English is, and they just help students have a better education life once they arrive in America. So I was in that program till 5th grade, and after that, that's when, went to middle school, high school, and now I'm here.
I got to experience all of American baloney. Yes, absolutely. The good things and the not so good things about America. Yes. So you grew up in refugee camps, so that was your norm.
Yes.
And it wasn't your parents' norm. How, when you're a kid, kids are so resilient, but you still have your traumas that you go through. So how do you feel like you were, in a mental health space when you got here? Because even though, supposedly you were coming to someplace better, and I hope that it was in many ways, I'm sure it wasn't in some ways too, but how do you remember, where your head was at, where your emotions were at, where your anxiety was when you first got here?
So honestly, I did not think about my mental well-being, just because that wasn't shown to us. That wasn't something that was normal to us. And I didn't start I wasn't able to express my emotion, my feelings, and learn about my mental well-being until I was in the 11th grade. And this was after I took a psychology course. And up till then, I didn't know what psychology was, what therapy was. And at one time, my English teacher did recommend me to seek counseling, just because many different things were manifesting in different ways. And she could tell, but I didn't understand what was going on.
Right.
So she recommended me to a therapist, and I was seeing the therapist. I saw her for 2 times, but the second time, I guess I had said something that was alarming, and people came to my house and I got in trouble for that. So after that, I had a goal of to never go to therapy again, just because I didn't understand it. And,
right.
And I ended up getting in trouble. But as I was growing, I went to college. I got a better understanding, and I am majoring in psychology with a concentration of cognitive and behavior neuroscience. So I just started learning more about, what mental health was, how it looks like, and how you can, focus on your mental well-being and have a life. And my younger sibling also has ADHD, and my other one has anger management. So it's been a process, helping them and helping my mom understand what it is. So that's how I've been moving around with knowing how to express my emotion, feelings. And I've also been helping my mom also understand, just to break that stigma. So
right. You're becoming what you needed. So that experience, because I've had that happen to me too. I said some things to a guidance counselor, and then all of a sudden, DSS and all kinds of things are showing up, and that made me not want to tell anybody anything, which isn't good. So there are a lot of things that I've learned from doing this show and all the counselors that I work with and so on, about how you handle those kind of situations. And they weren't really handled well for me. I think that they're getting handled somewhat better, or they have been, at least for a time, because there's just more knowledge about what mental health is and psychology and so on. But at that time, that must have been terrifying for you.
It was.
Yeah.
I was actually mad at my English teacher for a long time.
Were you? Oh man. Yeah, because those things come out, I had something come out in an essay I had written that set off alarm bells for the school, and I was like, well, this is my norm. So, you're the way you're handling it is very insensitive. It's making me scared, but this is what is normal in my world. That's the problem. I'm not the problem. What's going on in my world is a problem, but like I said, mental health stuff was not, I'm 50, so mental health stuff was not anything that anybody talked about back then.
Yes.
So how about, you make the journey here, you obviously that's traumatic in and of itself, and learning a new language and all that. Luckily kids tend to pick those things up, and you're just in immersion right there. Like you have to learn it because you're being immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that's probably a distraction, but what kind of behaviors did you see in yourself start to pop out kind of sideways because of what you weren't getting help with and how to manage?
Mm-hmm. Well, so even in high school, I did have 3 jobs, and my mental well-being just wasn't in the right space. So it was just my mom and my 4 younger brothers. So it was, us together, and me trying to help my mom and everything, and having to go through a lot of things in the past, like coming to America, even before America. I just didn't realize how to like properly deal with it. But there's times where like I was sick for such a long time, and I'm also not a person who used to get sick, but once that happened, it was like, okay, so now I need to start taking care of my mental well-being. But it also showed with my physical well-being. Like I had no energy, and the things that I like loved doing, I didn't have energy to do those things.
Right.
And even in classes, like I was a student, and it also just showed in my grades, and in the classes that I was in. And around that time, I did get dropped from the honor program, just because my grades were dropping, and there were different things that was going on in my life around that time, and I was most of the time focusing on my family and how I can like better help them.
Right.
So different things were coming out.
A lot of responsibility for someone so young, especially with everything that you've been through. I think about when I would get behind in school. It wasn't like it was hard for me, but I would get behind because I was very depressed.
Yes.
And then it seemed like I will never catch up. It's Mount Everest, and I am never going to be, I barely have energy because my way of dealing with things was to just sleep all the time. So, so that was difficult too. I know that they handle things differently now when it comes to students that get behind like that because of things like depression. But back then it was, well, too bad, dig in, figure it out, and that did not work for a student like me. What was your experience like?
Yeah, my experience was actually like the same, but I also tend to not sleep. So I always like stayed up, and I always thought about the future, like what if and buts, and what if this doesn't happen? What if, my family, just a lot about death as well. And it was hard. It was hard to even like speak to my parents or to my mom about it, just because that wasn't welcome. Like you going to speak to your parents about something that's bothering you, or even like mental well-being, that wasn't welcome. And at that time, like, my mom was always like, grinding to, make sure that, like we were safe, we had food to eat, and we had clothes on our back. So it was even hard for us to like sit down and communicate, because I'll come from school, I go to work, and then I'll pick up my siblings from daycare, and I'll feed them, and then they'll go to sleep. And by the time my mom was home, I was already asleep. And we never saw each other until like it was the weekend, because both of us, we didn't work. And but even then, we did not talk about, what was bothering me, what was coming on with me, and what was bothering her. And I just always had to suppress all those emotions, all those feelings. And it was really easy, but now it's so difficult. Recently, my stepbrother and one of my close friend had died, and that's when everything exploded. Anxiety was bad, depression was bad. And that's when everything started coming out, and I got sick again. I could not get up, I could not eat. And it was also hard because when my stepbrother passed, I was the one who had to deal with, funeral, everything, because my family don't speak well enough English. So I was making flyers, I was arranging this, arranging that. and I didn't have time to like mourn or cry. And
Right.
like in that state, everyone was, you know, crying, you know, showing their emotion, but it was so hard for me to like, you know, cry. And my family have never seen me cry. So I just thought like it would be difficult for them to see me cry. And they always see me as like, you know, a strong person. And I always get praised for that. But it's hard for me to tell them like, you know, I'm not as strong as you think.
Well, and you know what's interesting? I always think about that, you know, and you know, I'm glad we can talk about this because you're studying psychology, but it's always interesting to me that whole verbiage around what is a strong person. So a strong person is someone who doesn't cry, handles everything perfectly, takes care of everybody else, puts themselves last. And the reality, once you get into psychology, you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's not actually, that's coping. that's like amazing coping skills, but it's going to hit you at some point. So then you learn, oh, well, wait a minute. Okay. So a really strong person is someone who will cry, who will be vulnerable, who will say, I can't handle all this. But when you're the one that has to do it all, like it is really hard to go from that first point I talked about to the second one. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, wait a minute. Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to cry, but if I take the lid off of that pot that's boiling, it ain't going to stop boiling. You know what I mean? It's really difficult. So how do you cultivate that in yourself now? Because obviously you're a high achiever. So you know that you're going to have to temper yourself. I mean, I am too, trust me. There's no way that I could have done this whole network in the time frame that I did if I wasn't a high achiever, but you have to take care of yourself. And it's hard when everybody around you and you expect you to be, you know, basically perfect.
Yes. So now I do have like a therapist who I see every week. And I am learning and I'm starting to be able to be comfortable saying no. Before it was, yes, I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you. And it was so overwhelming that I didn't have time for myself and, you know, time to sleep. So now like I do not feel bad saying no, or, you know, letting them know like, hey, I have something else I need to do. Let me look at this, you know, another time. And especially since I am away from my family. So I'm in Fairfax and they're in Roanoke. And, you know, being away from them was a good thing and a bad thing.
Tell me why. Get whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. It was a good thing because I have freedom. I have freedom and I also have time for myself. Before I did not. It was always, you know, okay, my siblings, like, you know, like I need to pick them up. They need to focus on eating, school. And even like during the break or during like the whole pandemic when I was home, I was helping them with their homework from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Right.
And I did not have time to do my own work or, you know, anything that I wanted to do. And that's how it is when I am home. But it is also bad because I am worried more. It gives me a peace of mind when I am home because, you know, obviously I'm not going to do anything to like, you know, hurt them or put them in a dangerous situation and everything. But when I'm not home, I think about them more. I think about like, what ifs, you know, what if something happened and I'm not there? And, you know, just anything can happen in the world. And
do you start to like make a movie in your head of like let me tell you something that a really great therapist gave to me. And I still do it to this day. And we're talking maybe 10 years ago, I was told this. It helps a lot with that exact thing that you're talking about. Anytime you start making a movie and your body, you know, you have to understand too, that when you do that, your body is doing what it is designed to do by helping you finish that movie. So because that's, you know, part of our, you know, our physiology is, well, we're going to finish that thought. And it's really hard to stop that. So this therapist said to me, every time you do that, try to remember to stop yourself at some point and then just say, well, that's something that doesn't need to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And erase everything that you thought. She goes, I want you to do that every day, all day long. And let me tell you, the first like 2 years that well, maybe not 2 years, the first year that I heard about this, I was sick of saying, well, that's something that doesn't get, because I said it 100 times a day. It made me realize how often I spin out.
Mm-hmm.
Now that rarely happens. And when it does happen, I kind of laugh and go, oh, there you go. You're doing that thing. It's a reminder to me, oh, you're working too hard because you're falling back on some of those bad habits that get you, that cause anxiety to yourself, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I used to also picture taking a big eraser and erasing the movie I just made in my head.
Ah.
And it's
like okay.
You're laying down new tracks in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting down new neural pathways in your brain every time you do that are more positive, because that comes from PTSD and trauma, and you can't help it. You had that at such a young age. It's part of your makeup. So you've got to work harder to lay down a new train track.
I would definitely try
so
it.
Just think about that one. You don't have to do it, of course, but think about that one. It's a little thing that helps a lot. Mm-hmm. So I understand being away. Yeah, you have some room to breathe your own air. So, okay. So I want to ask you this, and this is a big question, and so we can take a small chunk of it, but all the pandemic, obviously huge. That's happening for everybody in the world. But did you ever think about, or have you thought about what it's like for people that come from where you came from, how the pandemic affects them as opposed to how it affects people in America?
Mm-hmm. I honestly think about that every single day, especially when we are focusing on different programs and interventions we want to include in Safe Haven. So right now it's a really difficult time, and it's so difficult for the refugee and immigrants who are in like either camps, because from my experience and memory, it's crowded.
Yeah.
It's crowded. It's hard to find food. It's hard to get anywhere without bumping into another person. And they're honestly in in a high area that, the virus,
high risk.
High risk. And it's sad because, there's things that different countries can do for, refugee and immigrants in refugee camps, but are they going to do it?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Like how important is it to whomever is in charge to make sure that refugee camps have personal protective equipment like face masks or eye shields or sanitizer or washing your hands when access to water and even soap and water is difficult. Like I always think, like, how important is it to the powers that be to make sure that places that get ignored so much and have to fight for every morsel are getting things like a mask, as opposed to in America where, we complain about, it just drives me crazy. The whole, I'm not going to wear a mask. I saw someone that I know very well that did a whole recording about how they're not going to shop at a store because this store is forcing them to wear a mask. And I just kind of shake my head at it. Do you know how spoiled and just entitled you are? Like, do you know that there are people that can't what planet are you from? But we are spoiled here. Boy, are we spoiled.
And it's sad because people don't think about that. They don't think about the others who are suffering from this, who are having a difficult time with this. They're honestly just worrying about, going outside and
I want to go to the movies. My civil liberties are being taken away because I can't go to the movies. Really? It's just those are the things that make me go, I'm really glad that I live here, but on the other hand, I'm embarrassed of the way that we've, some of us behave. Just truly, it's mortifying in many, many ways.
It is.
Yeah, exactly. I always want to go, let me take you somewhere. Let me take you to some of my friends who are on the front line, nurses, EMTs, doctors that are walking in and having to scrub themselves. So before they even go home to their families, or that are camping out in their garages because they don't want to bring COVID home. I mean, it's all that perspective. So there's a reason for this mad Mr. Toad's Wild Ride I'm going on. For you to see what you've seen and what you've experienced so different from here and at such a young age, and then you get the full experience of here, how do you keep from, just being outraged and angry?
In a way, it's kind of sad because it's like a norm now. Like, it's like, oh, okay, like, I see this all the time. And I think about, back in the refugee camp and where we were living, it's like they also don't know like what's going on in those areas. And even if I wanted to tell them, they wouldn't listen. It'll be like, oh, sad story. Okay, move on,
Right.
And it's also hard to like come to that person or that here and like approach and let them know that, hey, like, what you're doing, what you're saying is not right, because this population, different people in this area are having a difficult time. Like, aren't you supposed to be a good example and at least thinking about other people who are out here suffering? And we see a lot of like petition on social media, and just making sure that like the social media community is like helping people abroad, or either donating, but at the same time it's like once they like either promote it once and that's it. And it's difficult to talk to them, or to talk to I guess not this generation, but people in America in general. It's just
it is. I want you to keep on, because I mean, this is the kind of thing that I don't know why I always thought about this. Maybe because I had cousins who were from Vietnam and they came here, right after the Vietnam War. And so I saw a lot of the racism, and that they told everyone they were Hawaiian because it was safer than saying they were Vietnamese. I mean, I saw, these are my cousins. I practically lived at their house when I was a little kid. So I saw this going on, and maybe that made me more compassionate, or the fact that I'm like so sensitive, it's actually frightening. But a lot of people would think I'm not because of what I put out there. Because when you're really sensitive, you have to kind of you have to erect some steel walls sometimes. But for whatever reason, I always thought about those things. And so I get so angry, and I always wonder, where do I put that? And so I put it into, you put it into advocacy, but then you're seeing it all the time. Like, if you don't get into advocacy, then you can just let it up to town, live in my life, and I don't have to know what's going on over there, So I always wonder, when you have it in front of your face, someone just being so whatever that is, how you approach that with compassion, especially when you know that you are not going to change their mind because they are dug in.
And it's really hard for I would approach, like, if I do hear something that is really alarming, or also something that is angry towards me, I honestly try to go with like an open mind. Like, okay, like, yes, I have my own views, but they also have their own views. But I also try to be humble as well. Like, approach them in a way of like educating them and not talking at them. And I try to hold my anger in. I talk to free first before approaching or saying anything online. And then
so hard.
Yeah. It's really difficult, but it's also better because when you're approaching someone and they look at it as an attack, they're not going to take it as a learning moment. Yeah.
Or that they're being judged. Yeah. Or if
Sorry,
they
go
feel
ahead.
like, no, it's
Mhm.
like, or if they feel like
Yeah.
they're being judged by you, like you're so great and they're these ignorant, whatever, that doesn't work. That dynamic doesn't, because I used to be judgy about
Mhm.
those kind of things. And now, you know, I really try not to talk that way where I'm like, you know, judgmental, but sometimes it pops out anyway.
Mhm.
But how do you, I'm curious how, you know, with everything, you know, with COVID, with everything you've lived through, your worldly life experience, and then also all the things that you see going on here when it comes to racism. How do you deal with, okay, let's say you're in class,
Mhm.
and I know you're, you know, doing remote school, but when you were in class and you'd be sitting next to someone and you're, you know, you say, hi, oh yeah, you can borrow my pencil or whatever's
Mhm.
going on, but you just read something online that they wrote that was so racist or
Mhm.
so whatever. Like, how do you, like, it feels like you're always in cognitive dissonance. I know how I deal with it. I'm curious, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Mhm. I've actually never like had that kind of experience, but
Oh,
if I
good.
were to have that kind of experience, I'm a vocal person too. Like, I'm not gonna let things slide too, especially if it's harming to other people or just not. It's just not. It's promoting negatively.
Right.
So if I were in that class with the person who just posted something negative about either a person or racial
Right.
slurs and everything, I'll definitely go up to that person, either sit next to them and let them know that, you know, like this post that you just made affects this population, and I'll try to like help them or see and understand how it affected that person in that population. And a lot of people also sometimes they do post things thinking that it came out in like a positive way or like in positive intention and not negative intentions. So some people take the advice, some people don't. And
Mm.
if if I go up to that person and you know they end up not taking it well, I just let it be, because
Mm.
sometimes, you know, when I try to force someone, that's how it makes it harder for them to, you know, even
Be
learn or
around you.
understand
And
it. Yeah.
right.
Uh, so that's how I'll handle it.
Interesting. Yeah, I always wonder, you know, because it's so your generation, especially is, you know, social media, online, that online presence. How about all of the messages that are told to you, you know, as a young woman that isn't white, when you come here and there's all this stuff in social media from our celebrity culture
Mhm.
of you must look this way, you must be this way, you da, 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 da. What kind of bombardment effect or way has that shaped, you know, your thought process about how you should be?
Yeah. So growing up, actually, that was like a really big issue within myself.
Mm.
Now I'm pretty fine with it. I try not to be, you know, focused in like celebrities. I'm honestly always just focused on like the today and the
Right.
things that that's gonna help me in my future. So
Right.
growing up, I do have like, you know, like you know, African body, so
Right.
thickness and in high school and middle school, it was different from what the students saw, either in celebrities or other students around me.
Hmm.
So I was always that student that had a big body or a big booty or like curvy.
Right.
And
Me
there
too.
are times, yeah. So it was it was overwhelming, and there was times where I would cry and not wanting to be who I was then.
Yeah.
Even like a person coming from Africa, like there's times where I denied being an African or being an African woman or um,
Right.
And there's times where I went days without eating just because I wasn't comfortable within my body. But I have learned I love my body now. I could care less on what anyone say.
Exactly.
But during
Good
those
for
times,
you.
like, yeah, that's when like a lot of insecurities are out there, especially when you're surrounded with negative people, and also people who are going through the things that you're going through. You're not seeing a lot of like positive things or positive messages coming out. And in middle school, like all that students are worrying about is, you know, like being popular.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and it changes once you leave high school. It changes, like,
and you
it's
cannot
like,
tell a high schooler that. You can't tell them,
no.
listen, all these people that you think are so whatever are going to be like, you're not even going to remember their names when you when you get out of high school.
And it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter who you were in high school or middle school. It's not. College, like, reality hits when you're in college.
Yes, then you're like, oh, this is the real world.
Yeah.
Personal responsibility. Got it. And some people don't get it until much later. Well, let's talk about when you started Safe Haven Space and what it's about.
Of course. So Safe Haven, so we're seeking to be a nonprofit organization. So it's for refugee and immigrant students, and we want to assist them with the transition to the American life, by educating and implementing mental health and well-being programs. So this started, so the idea started a long time ago, actually in high school, but I also never knew how to like start something or start a program. So once I entered college, I just saw a lot of like my friends and family go through different mental well-being and different mental well-being issues, and it was hard for them to deal with it. And we were also in that same circle, like we'll talk to each other and see how we can help one another. But, you know, being a refugee and immigrant, that's not welcomed, and that's not something that you see once you come to America. And it's sad to say, but, you know, I feel like they have the American system has failed refugee and immigrants, because they bring in refugee and immigrants, or refugee and immigrants come in and they just provide, you know, living situation or living expenses and you know, jobs, but they don't focus on the mental well-being.
Right.
They don't focus on what they experience coming to America, or even where they were living, or even a different culture, language, and that adds on many trauma to previous trauma that they've been through. So I just wanted to create something for the students, and just for them to have a place to you know, feel safe and be able to speak about their experience, and also learn about mental health, just to also break that stigma. And we also want to like extend it to the parents as well, because we just want to provide that sense of support from the parents, because we want to be able to have the students be comfortable with coming into our program, and their parents not encouraging it, because there's always going to be that stigma. But we want to educate the parents as well to break that stigma and just to be comfortable with it.
Right, exactly. To know, you know, what it is they're going to learn there and how it's helpful.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, it's called Safe Haven, but I'm given the full domain there. I want to plug that domain because I want everybody to go visit it, and we'll give it out right at the end. But what I think is fascinating about this too is, yes, America, and I'm getting on a soapbox, but forgive me, listeners. What in the world was this country made of? What in the world was this country founded upon? Immigrants. There is not a single person except for Native Americans. There's, other than Native Americans, there's not a single person that's here that does not have genes that come from immigrants. So why in the world are we trying to not welcome the very people who founded this country? It's amazing to me.
Exactly.
But that's a whole other thing. So, okay. So now will you share with our listeners where they can find out more about you and how they can help your organization?
Yes, of course. So we do have different social media platforms. So we have Instagram, we have Facebook, and we have our website. So our both Instagram and website and Facebook, it's called Safe Haven Space. So if you type it in the search button, it's gonna come in. And we also are looking for more volunteers, whether it's psychologists or therapists who are willing to volunteer their time and help those students in our program. We're also looking for, more staff. So if you are available and, free and would like to, give your time to this amazing cause, you can also reach out to us either on social media, and I can also give out my email as well. Would you like me to do that now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you could email me at eindelele@gmu.edu. And I always check my email, so I'm really responsive. And if you would like to be a part of the team, please just reach out or would like to help in any way.
I love it. You've got a fully multicultural team, which is fantastic.
Yes.
And listeners, just so you know, I want to put this out, positive energy for Egette and her team to have time at some point to have a podcast on this network. We're going to do a scholarship for that, like we've done with plenty of other people on the network too. But you know how we are here. I want voices of this generation. So again, Egette, you know that because I talked about it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so grateful.
I'm whenever you're ready, it's here for you, and I'm so grateful to Rodney for sending you my way. It's such a pleasure to speak to you, and you are doing fantastic things in the world, and you just got to keep on doing them. So I see nothing but awesomeness for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and just welcoming me to hear my story. I'm really grateful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And listeners, please go to safehavenspace.com, donate, volunteer your time, share everything, that they're doing on your social media. That's how we get the word out. And of course, thank you as always to tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Hi, listeners. I'll make it quick. These are some really cool places that give discounts and other cool things for listeners of Mental Health News Radio Network. If you want to get amazing help with healing from narcissistic abuse, go to healfromanarcissist.com. If you want CBD products that are the best of the best, I use them myself, go to proze.com and use the code mentalhealth20, mentalhealth20. If you want to get daily perk ups that help retrain your brain to think more positively, go to perkupdaily.com. And also, just because this one's fun, snarkycandles.com. I guarantee you'll love them. Snarky with a Y, SNARKY, candles.com. And don't forget, if you want to hear all the shows on the network about first responders, you can go to firstrespondermentalhealthnetwork.com, and all of our shows that focus on narcissistic abuse, narcissisticabusehealingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, and back to the show.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but
home.